Hey, and welcome back. And wow, we have done quite a bit together, haven't we? We have gone from, if this is the first time using 3D, to making some pretty kick-ass renders. Let me tell you, most people's first year in 3D doesn't look as good as your first day might have. So what we're going to work our way into is being able to light cars. And it's really not about the lighting, as you're starting to understand with Cine Designer. Adding lights, that's easy. That's fun. That's DP stuff, framing up, doing camera work. That's what you do in real life. But what is tricky is in the computer, getting things to look like how you want them to do. How do you make something look shiny? How do you make something look reflective? How do you make it transparent? Of course, when we come eventually to lighting cars, which will be in the next episode of this, you're going to have to be able to make plastic, car paint, glass, and chrome. Cars really ask you to fully understand how materials work in the real world and lighting, and they ask you to be able to do that in the computer. And I'm going to be able to get you through that process right now. We're going to go over shaders. We're going to talk about how to make things shiny, how to change their color, how to do transparency so that they're see-through, and how to make things reflective. We're going to have to clean up the terminology there because I used some terms that were not 100%, but let's hop into Cinema 4D and Cine Designer. So here is a rig that I'm going to be giving you, the R1 users here. Why didn't that work? And it is a table. So thanks a lot, Matt. Thanks for the table, right? But what's nice about this table is that you can dynamically change its height and its width and its depth. So if you're dealing with tabletop, this starts to be really important to you. Now, what I'm going to just show you right now is that I had to program this in centimeters because that's how computers work. All computers work in metric and in centimeters. Maya, Blender, Unity, Unreal, and Cinema 4D, they're native centimeters. So I program in native centimeters. But how do we convert this? So say I want this to be 30 inches tall, which is a very American US standard for table height. Though we're doing tabletop, it doesn't really matter. We're going to do 30 inches times 2.54. So sorry about the math and the conversion. You're just going to have to do that. And what it'll help you do is it'll help you start to get used to metric and centimeters, because as we get into advanced photometry, reality capture, and scanning, having a sensitivity and an awareness of metric, as far as like how many centimeters is tall is a person, how many centimeters tall is a room, these are things you know in Imperial, but you should also start to learn them in metric. Because metric is easier for math and you'll be able to move faster, and faster is better. When you're scanning a room, the most annoying thing that I can think of is like, oh, it's 20 feet, 5 inches. That sucks. That's a terrible measurement. You want to work in pure centimeters and metric. It's much better long term. So I'm going to force you into learning metric here. But if you want to cheat, let's cheat. Let's make it 72 inches times 2.54. And deep, we're going to make it 48 inches times 2.54. So that is this table here. Really helpful rig. I expect you'll use it for dinner tables, for any of your tabletop jobs. And honestly, when I go to make the steel deck rig, it's going to be essentially the same thing. And this is what I'm calling a cinematography database rig. So instead of you modeling out all these cubes and stuff like that, I don't want you to be 3D modeling. I want you to be designing camera work and lighting. I'm going to be giving you a lot of these rigs. So everything that you would normally have to 3D model, like chairs, even rooms and walls and windows and stuff like that, you won't have to. If you want to invest the time to learn that, I think that's going to be valuable. But my goal is to provide you with tools like this to make it easy. Import the table, put the dimensions in, flying. That's what we have to be able to do here. And the nice thing about this is, like, if the director's like, ooh, what if you make the table just a little bit taller, a little bit higher? You can tweak that here, like you're a flame artist, or like you're coloring. You don't have to get in there and be like, oh, it's going to be 10 minutes. Let me just go. Everything I want to be real-time tweakable for client. I want you to be able to do this live in front of your directors, in front of your clients, at NAB, at a huge trade show talking about some sort of new thing, be able to do this all live. That's the goal. So let's get right into textures. You'll see that this has textures on it, but we're not going to talk about that. So I'm going to slide this up because my little video has to be here. And I'm going to put my video here, and down here is where all the textures are. But let's start with some objects. Let us bring in a sphere. Sorry if we're not friends anymore because I just said it like sphere. Let's change this from feet. Actually, it doesn't really matter. So we haven't dealt with a lot of primitives yet, but you click the primitive you want up there, and you can, look at the properties. You can change it around it. I really don't want to cover that stuff. That's boring, generic Cinema 4D stuff. you'll see, I hope what you find somewhat engaging about this tutorial series is that I skipped all the boring, basic stuff, and we went right into cinematography, camera work, and lighting. All the things I'm trying to show you are then immediately applicable to your life as a DP. So let's call this first one, so say we're gonna do flat paint. So say we colored this whole thing, we painted it with white paint, and it was very, what I would call diffuse, and it's not shiny or glossy at all. We're actually gonna make a perfectly not shiny object. So down here in the texture menu, you can do new material or Command N, or I just end up double clicking and it makes a new material. I'm gonna bring this up just in case my window's not big enough. And so we have this new material down here. And when you click it, like anything else, you get its attributes. So the first one is basic, and it's its name. And let's call this paint flat. And you'll see that there's a bunch of things here, and it's pretty intuitive. To change the color, you have to have color on. To make it emit light, we're not going to get onto that in this one, you would turn on luminance, and this speaks to how the space lights work and how Kinoflows work. So imagine that that was a Kinoflow shaped object. If I turn on luminance, that starts to give off light. Now let's talk about that in another video. That's its own thing. How do we make space balloons and stuff like that? I will give you space balloons, but I'll also show you how to make them, because there's a lot of weird shaped stuff that like I'm not necessarily going to have ready for you in R1 or R2 or anything like that. There's a lot of lights, but if you want to go ahead and make your own, I'll show you how to do that. But I'll make you some really nice ones that you'll like eventually later too. If you want things to be shiny, you would turn on reflectance, and we're going to go over that. And then so forth and so on. There's transparency if you want it to be see-through, a bunch of other stuff. But I'm going to show you the stuff that's relevant to you making real-world materials for things that you want to do. So to put something on an object, to put a texture on an object, we're going to click it and we're going to drag it onto the object. So simple. I love that. That's so much better than a lot of other programs I won't name. Maya. So basically, let's click this object, and the only thing I'm going to do is that segments changes how much geometry is in there. So we want it to be a little bit more realistic. I'm going to say 64. And you'll see that I'm not going to get into tags today. Actually, we're going to get into tags a little bit, but essentially, the way that Cinema 4D organizes attributes is it adds these things called tags. So it's kind of like if you know WordPress, if you have a WordPress post, you can tag it as like a tutorial or tag it as a about cars. And then you can click that tag and everything about cars shows up. It's a similar system here. And it's really powerful because it's not baked into the object that this has a texture on it. It's just this tag. If I delete this texture tag, there's no more texture on it. It's really nice, and it's really visual to see that that object has that texture on it. I really like that about Cinema. So let's look at the texture that's on it. So let's go. We have everything off but color, and that's what we're going to start with. And what we can do here is we can change the color, this main color here. So let's pick, so there's hue, saturation, and value. And I don't have a ton of time. If I have to go over hue, saturation, and value, like you don't color and you don't understand that, that's like so core fundamental. I'll have to make a whole video on that. But essentially, here's the color. Let's pick a nice color like blue. It's going to be a blue paint. So here's the saturation. Down here on the left is white. Up here is very, very bright. Full saturation. I'm going to have to do something really pretty intense if I have to explain what that is later. And here's value. So black down here and full color at the end. So this is like the impossible color you could never get in real life. Realistic colors never have, real world colors never have full saturation, nor are they full, well, value could be. But essentially you want, in CG, you want to stay away from full white on anything, and you want to stay away from full black. The computer doesn't handle those very well. It's going to start looking really fake. So let's look at this blue ball here. And that's all you need to know about color. So when you're in here, you have the color tab checked. You can go to color and you can just change the color. Really easy. Let's go back and pick that blue. Yeah, now we're like kind of like a toothpaste color. Aquafresh, is that the name of the toothpaste? So let's actually light this, because it's all cute to look at it in the viewport. Let's actually light it. And I think the best thing to light this is going to be a big old diffusion frame. And if you work in tabletop, you're like, oh, I know this story. Tiny round object that'll eventually will be reflective needs a gigantic source. If you're new to tabletop, you might be like, what the, are you on drugs? This is how we do tabletop. Actually, you get it even closer a lot of the times, but this is going to work out fine for us. So let us turn on our diffusion frame. Oh, and let me point something out the diffusion frame. I saw some people using this. Let me just point something out. So the diffusion frame only emits light in one direction. And you'll see that this thing has like a triangle. This part of the triangle, that's where the light's going. I should have made that more clear. I should put like just more clear. You'll kind of figure it out as you turn it on actually. But so let's turn it on here. You'll see that, yeah, see, it's not lighting. If I go like this, there's no light coming out the back of it. It's meant to go in a certain direction. Sorry if that wasn't clear before. So we're a bit bright to be this close to the object. 40, 10, 10's not enough, 20, 30. Let's hit render real quick. See as long as we're getting exposure correctly. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. I'll take that. So, so do I have to turn on? So if this happens to you, this happens to me sometimes. So like, where'd everything go? I hit H, nothing happens. I don't know what this is. Also, it says grid spacing nan FT, which means something got screwed up. This happens to me a lot. I don't know why. And I used to have to like end the scene and come back. Let me show you how to fix this. I'm glad this happened actually. And Maxon, I'm going to send you this video because you and I are going to be doing a lot of work together. What's going on, guys? So it's probably, maybe it's me. Is it me? That's cool. Switch to parallel, which is interesting. We haven't talked about this. This is orthographic. But don't worry about that. Orthographic is not what you need. Perspective. And we're back. And we're back. And sorry if there's background noise. On top of running cinematography database, I also run the laundry service for our family. And I do the laundry. So let's see. Do I need to turn on GI for this? Yeah. So here's another thing. We're going to start moving into what is called in CG called look dev, where you're going to be changing the shaders to affect how they look, of course. And that's called look dev. Is shader and lighting relationships. As a DP, that's now your job. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you some ways to make this process faster and better. So first of all, turn on physical if you have physical. If you don't have physical, I guess I don't know what's going to go on here. But I don't know. We'll figure it out. You just render the normal way. It's going to be a little slower. So we're going to go to the physical tab now. And what we're going to do is we're going to keep it on low. When you go to render your final one, put it on high. Go get a beer. It's going to be a hot minute. Maybe go to bed, actually. Keep it on low, and then go to progressive. Actually, if you go to progressive, it turns off. So here's me knowing a lot about computers. Let's turn on global illumination, because that's going to make things a little bit more realistic. Let us change to low. And then go to irradiance cache. Also change it to low. That's it. Honestly, if you tried to learn another render engine, there's a billion settings. That's all you had to do, is just turn this all to low. So we have what? We have physical and progressive. Anything in here? I think that's fine. We'll go over these settings in depth later. And then turn everything to low, because we want it to be fast. So let me show you something what happens now. Let's hit Apple R. It rendered instantly. It starts off really low quality, and then as you just let it sit there, as you can look at the bottom, it starts to progressively get nicer and nicer. But that's good, because sometimes we just want a fast, quick, dirty look at it, and this is a great way to do it. And then let me show you one more thing. If you go to render, interactive render, it makes this little box, and only what's in the box will get rendered. So if you have a big busy scene and you just want to look at this one thing, you can do that. And it is Alt-R to turn it off. But this scene is going to be so simple, we don't have to worry about it. So let's look at this object. And we're going to start making other textures after this. So let's hit Apple R. Pretty quick little render there. Now the table surface has a little bit of a specular on it. It's got a little bit of a reflection. And we're going to talk about that next. We're going to make this ball also reflective. So that's a very diffuse texture. You see that there's no reflections in it. There's no reflection of the light source. And it's diffuse. There's actually no such thing as this in the real world. You could never, like, paint is pretty shiny. There really aren't diffuse textures like this in the world. But you can do that in 3D, and it has like a nice flat paint look. So let's move this over here, and I'm going to hold Control, and I'm going to make another one. So let's double tap, and we're going to make another texture, and it's here. I'm going to put my video around there, so hopefully this doesn't get confusing, but you guys are going to get the stuff now. So we made a new material over here, and let's start by dragging it onto our sphere. Now, if you go up here now to our thing, we have our thing. We're going to call this shiny paint. You'll see that there's two textures on it. Delete the green one. That's the old one. We'll talk about that order later. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure there's just one per object at this point. Unless you know more about Cinema 4D, don't worry about it. So here's our material. We're going to go to basic, and we're going to call it shiny. Is that not how you spell shiny? I don't care. That's how I spell it. How do you spell it? we're going to make a shiny paint object. So let's make the base color of that paint red. Or make it whatever color you want. You know what? Make it whatever color you want. But make it a little bit darker. A little bit on the dark side, because we're going to make it shiny. So if it's a white shiny thing, I mean, the specular is going to blow out. So let's make it a little bit darker. So we're in here. So now we have reflectance on. Let's keep reflectance on. If it's not, see how it's flat here? When you turn it back on, you get a preview of it. Yeah. So that's how you can tell it's on, kind of. So color, we did color. Let's go to reflectance. Now, reflectance is where we're going to spend a lot of time right now. Once you understand reflectance, you will understand most objects and how to make them look realistic. So I'm going to just do it. I'm not going to explain every single thing about it, but you can just follow these steps, I promise, and it's going to work out for you. I watched a lot of tutorials on this. Did my own research. I fully textured a car to acceptable photorealism, and this is the method that I use and technique. I would suggest learning this first. If you find a better way to do it, by all means, do it your way. But this is the way that I recommend doing it for cine designers, for DPs. So let's go back. We're in color, we're in reflectance. Now we have this thing here, and it's called default specular, and you don't want that. And what you're going to do is you're going to click it, and you're going to click remove. So all we have now, it's a little bit simpler to look at, right? So color, reflectance, you deleted that layer. That was a layer. This stuff, guess what? You never have to touch it. Don't mess with it. So what you're going to do now that there's no layers, you're going to hit add. Now there's all these different things, and all these are different ways of making reflections. And guess what? The only one you need to know about is Beckman. For Cinema 4D Physical, us moving forward, we're only going to use Beckman because Beckman, from my research, from what people tell me, is the most realistic. And that's what we're going to go for here. We're not going to go all the way to photorealism, but Beckman does a good job, and we just want things to look real. That's all we want. So let's look at this now. So what happens if I render this? I don't even know what's going to happen now. Let me render this thing. Is it going to be... Okay, so what happened is, despite it looking red in the viewport, it became a full chrome sphere, essentially, right? This is what a chrome sphere would look like. And let's analyze what's happening here. I hope this doesn't turn off the render. Okay, so we have a reflection of the ball in the chrome sphere, and we have this big, we have a reflection of the table, and we have a reflection, of course, of the light source itself. And let me go check something really quick. You guys don't have to fully understand this or do it. Let me just make sure something's on in this. Yes, okay. So never mind that. You guys don't have to worry about it. I will explain what's going on behind the scenes of a lot of these rigs in a more advanced lessons, but I just wanted to check something. So yeah, so we are getting a reflection of the light source in it like you would in the real world. So consider we're lighting a chrome sphere. That's what this is. A car is the same thing. A car is a very shiny, complex object, and it sees the reflections of light. So I'm going to hit render again and see what's nice about progressive rendering is you just instantly see it, right? That's a nice way to work. I like this a lot. I'm going to probably do this a lot for my tutorials moving forward. It's kind of like Octane. So we see a reflection of the light source in the sphere. So that's how we're going to design lighting for cars, is because you're effectively designing this reflection that just went away in the car. So that's what's happening. So how do we control this reflection? So right now it's like completely reflection. It's completely sphere, but I don't want that. I want it to be a red sphere with a reflection in it. What we're going to do is we're going to double click layer, and we're going to write shiny. We're going to call it shiny. And what happens with shiny is if you bring it halfway, it mixes that reflection. So what you saw before was a pure reflection. And let me just do it for visual. Maybe I'll render. Let's just render so we have it. I don't have to deal with that nonsense. So there is our reflection. And what you do in progressive mode, if you're done, you just let this sit here until you feel like it's good enough quality. It'll just get better over time. You just hit stop, and then you could always save it. But this right here, that is a pure 100% reflection. And that's like a chrome sphere. And what basically happens is that you take this reflection and you're going to layer that over the diffuse color, so the red or whatever color is under this. So you're essentially putting this reflection over the red. And that is kind of how things work in the real world, kind of. So what I'm saying is that when I go to half here, you can see it in the preview, that it's half red underneath and then half that reflection over it. So let's hit render again. I'm just going to go into the picture viewer because then we save it. So you'll see here that yes, I can half see the reflection of the light source and the objects around it, but then I can see under that is a red, is the color. So you're starting to understand how we're going to probably make a car shader here. So let's stop this. So you can cheat here. So here's where you can start to cheat physics, is you're coming up with substances that may not be even possible in the real world. So I do 5% a lot for my objects because that starts to look kind of realistic, right? That might be kind of like a shiny, like a bowling ball or something, right? So start there. Start with a color underneath. It's your base color. It's in the color channel. And then play with this new layer. And as the type is Beckman, it doesn't really matter. And then try playing with its layer opacity, you could kind of call it. So I would say 5%. Don't worry about any of those. What we're going to look at next is, let's try doing, stop. See, it's going to keep getting better. Let's change from average to maximum. And what I believe is what they tell me, average tries to, what people have told me is that maximum is the most realistic. So that's what I'm going with for now. I'm not going to do a billion tests on it. Eventually I will, perhaps. Let's see if there's a difference, a perceivable difference. I don't know if there's going to be. I don't see a huge difference. That's the thing about CG. It's like sometimes you get diminishing returns for your realism attempts. Yeah. Maybe it only matters if there's multiple layers. I'm probably wrong about this. But again, guys, I'm going to get you through like kind of the minimum of what you need to know to make this happen. So let's go back to full shiny. So now it's going to be a chrome sphere. We're in Beckman. We have maximum, whatever. What you can do now is if you start moving this roughness thing, it's just like you think. It changes it from like a mirror to being glossy. So the reflection gets blurrier, essentially. So at a full 100, the reflection is full white or rough. And down here, it's like, now that's kind of being like a plastic. And as you get down here, it's like this is full chrome, and this is kind of blurry chrome. And like I said in other things, 0% is full chrome. It's a mirror. So if you want to previs mirrors, like build a mirror, make this material full like this, and you'll be able to see the reflection of what's in there, which will be helpful for blocking with mirrors. We'll do an example of that with we'll do a makeup tutorial where you're always dealing with mirrors and a set. How much set do you see in the reflection? Hey, we're going to know that stuff now. Such a massive thing to know that and to be able to communicate that. It's like, how did we ever shoot commercials without this? All to say that reflection, when roughness is at 0, it's kind of never possible to be at 0. So let's make it 10, and let's hit a render. Start this render. So now you can see in the reflection, let's let it render for just a little bit longer. It's blurry in rendering, but also you can see that the reflection itself is blurry. And that's cool. And for people that were wondering, how do I make the floor reflective and then that reflection kind of blurry? This is how we do it. Really simple. You make a new layer in Reflectance, and you bring its, well, it depends if you want to color under it or not. You can change the opacity of it, and then you can change the roughness down here. And that's pretty much it, guys. That's the main deal. So I'm going to stop this here. So that is Reflectance. What you can also do, and I'm not like the master at this yet, don't mess with layer color. We'll talk about that later. That's kind of more advanced when you start wanting to simulate things like gold and like more advanced substances. We can change this to conductor, and we're going to talk about this more with glass, and you can change it to like aluminum. And this is the Fresnel. So let's hit render and see if I can explain Fresnel to you. What Fresnel basically is that when you're looking directly at an object, so for instance, this sphere, we're directly looking at like this part of it here. And what happens with Fresnel, it means that like when you're directly looking at something perpendicular, it's not reflective. It's just not going to be that reflective, though. In this case, I don't really know what's going on. But as you get to things that are more on the side of this object, so it's like instead of looking straight at a plane, say the plane was like this, we're looking at it at a glancing angle. Think about looking at water. When you look straight down at water, you can see through it. When you look at a glancing angle at water, it's reflective. That is called the Fresnel effect, and that is how a lot of real-world objects work. This is getting advanced. You don't really got to think about it that much. I just wanted to bring it up so that you can do research on your own. What is Fresnel? How do you make Fresnel work? What type of things have Fresnel? What don't? That's going to be up to you to kind of look at this point. So we have made a shiny object that's got a little bit of roughness. I'm going to put it back to 5. So there, We've got our shiny paint and our flat paint. Let's bring them both into the same world. Just look at them really quickly. This might be a massive tutorial, but I need to get this info to you guys so that you guys can rock out and be doing Cine Design for real world jobs. So, okay, so it's still, we made a chrome sphere in that sphere. Let's go back and make it more of a paint color. Shiny paint. Oh yeah, so we got to change this back to like 10. Let's do it again. And hopefully my mistakes actually are helping you a little bit so you can kind of see what's going on. So that is color, which is called diffuse in most CG applications. The diffuse color is kind of like the base color. You can think of it like that. And then on top of that, literally on top of it, we're putting a reflection. And that reflection can be a full reflection, so it's a chrome sphere, or it can be like a percentage, so we can see through to the base coat. And that's how we make shiny objects. And then you can change the blurriness of it. That's all you really got to worry about. Those are the main things. So let's move on to the next thing. So we looked at chrome, and let's stop this. So let me add one more, because this is kind of like a paint one. Let's leave a chrome one in there. I'm going to call this chrome, and I'm going to delete the texture off of it. And let's make a real quick chrome substance. So this is going to be a good recap on how we do this. Color and reflectance are on. The color doesn't matter because we're going to go full chrome. Reflectance, delete this default. Bring in a Beckman. That's it. Done. There we go. So let's hit the render button. Look how fast the render is when you're in progressive. I love that about physical. So if you don't have physical, you can't do this. You just have to wait a bit longer. But for me, it's like, oh, good. Now I can just keep on living my life. I don't have to, what's it called? I don't have to like sit in there for 20 minutes and see how it's going to look. So pretty good. Chrome sphere. So flat paint, chrome, shiny object. Great. We're moving right along here. So now let's move on to, so what if I want to make this more plasticky? You're going to make it more blurry. And then make let's do it. Let's just make a plastic one. Okay, so new object. The scene's getting big. I'm going to need a bigger table. Let's make a plastic object now. So I just made this thing. Let's call this plastic or rubbery plastic, that sort of thing. Because like tires are going to be rubber. So you're going to need to know how to do that. Make a new one. Plastic rubber thing. Okay. So let's make the color a dark rubber, like that. Yeah, that's cool. Let's go to reflectance. Reflectance is on. Delete this thing. Let's add a new Beckman. And so for plastic, you want to make it like pretty diffuse. Because plastic, it depends on the type of plastic. If it's a shiny plastic, if it's a rough plastic, I'm going to leave that up to you. It's up to your eye. You now have to look at textures in the real world on a whole new level. And that's how CG artists work too. So let's do something like that. Looks pretty good. And what I'm going to change is the reflection strength. Now, plastic, rubber, the reflections in it are not going to be that bright. Like a chrome sphere, the reflection of it is the brightness of the light that's hitting it or reflecting in it. In plastic, if you see a reflection of a light in plastic, it's going to be a little bit duller, a little bit darker. And we do that with the reflection strength here. So you see that it's darker overall. And I'm going to do this, make it a tenor. So now it looks like plastic, right? Rubbery plastic. It's up to these are the main things you change to mess with that. Specular strength I'm going to bring down a lot. That's kind of like you just play with it. I don't know how to explain that exactly. There's other things that can happen. Ooh, should I show you bump real quick? I don't want to overwhelm you either, but let's put some noise in it. So I don't want to overwhelm you, but I think it's good to expose you to this. You can just skip this and let your mind deal with something else if this is too much. What we're going to put in this is noise. So the bump is going to change the bumpiness of it. That's it. That's really all that's going to happen. So let's give this a render with our new rubber subject and see how this looks. Doesn't look very good. You know why? Because I didn't apply it to the object. Yes. It's good to know without spending 30 minutes rendering. So there, now it's on there. Let's look at it again. I was like, wow, I don't understand textures. That doesn't look very good at all. So there's our rubber look. You'll see that the reflection compared to these reflections is very blurry, diffused, however you want to call it, but really it's blurriness, I think is the right word. And then you'll see that it's like, see how these are very white, bright reflections? This is a little bit darker gray. So that's kind of how I would make a tire material. So you should be remembering these because we are going to be making, we're going to be using these exact textures on a car later. So let's cut this, stop that jam. What's the last thing we're gonna do? Oh yeah, glass. So glass is, even I'm a little bit new to making glass in, trying to pick selection here. Okay, so the viewport in cinema sometimes is a little bit slow, a little bit weird. So let's make glass as our last stop here. And of course there's as many textures in the world as there are things. Everything kind of has like its own texture. But I'm going through like kind of like all the ones that you are going to be relevant for a car, which is going to be a lot of them. The only thing that we haven't really dealt with that's going to be important for you is human skin. Human skin is can be tricky if you want to go there. If you want it to be uncanny valley, like, is that a real picture? Like, that's, if you want your stuff to look like that, you can, or you just keep it simple and it's like, you know, we're just visualizing. We're not trying to like trick people. Glass, fun. Let's make glass, because glass is windshields. Glass is going to be like the coverings over your headlights. A lot of things are glass. So I believe for glass, we actually don't even need color. Unless you want like a colored glass, which we're not. I'm going to do clear glass. Okay. Reflectance we need, and we're going to do our first thing with transparency. So let's just put it on there for now and delete away the other one. I'm going to make this glass. Glass with one S, we're going with it. So you'll see that it's transparent, like even in the viewport, I can look through it. That's cool. Maybe we should, well, let's see. So you can see through the table. So this is already see-through. And I don't know what happens if you render it. Let's just see. What's this gonna look like rendered? Okay, cool. So it's see-through, but you're still seeing reflections in it. Okay, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves though. Let's go clean something up about this. The science behind reflections and recreating them in the computer goes deep, goes really deep. But guess what? We're not going deep. We're going to do it the stupid fast way. And it's going to look good. It's going to look great for you on your cars. We are in transparency here in our glass material. You can change the color if you want like colored glass. Just let's keep it simple here. We're going to change refraction preset. There's beer, milk, plexiglass. All these defined things. Water is important if you want to start doing water stuff. If you're doing, we can visualize water. Okay, it's gonna be cool when we do that. But let's keep it easy. We're gonna do glass, and automatically it changes a bunch of things like the index of refraction, the absorption, the Fresnel reflectivity, all that stuff. It's done for you. You just turn on transparency and you pick glass. That now will work for your windows, and that will work for your coverings, and it's gonna work for if you're making like a wine glass or a glass table. I believe it does it all for you. So even if we go to reflectance now, you'll see that, we got to delete always delete this thing called default specular. This transparency you can't remove. This came with transparency. When you turn this to glass, it gave you this one. So it's handling it all for you. So we'll go over this really quickly again when we do the car one, because we'll make all the textures from scratch. You literally make a texture, turn off the color, turn on transparency, and you're going to pick glass. And it's glass now. Maybe that sounded like a lot of steps. When I used to have to make glass the hard way in mental ray and V-ray, it's a lot more steps. A lot more settings you have to change in the render engine. It's like, this is all very easy. So I believe transparency and reflection are all set. The only thing about this is there's the reflection, the roughness is 0. So it might be a little bit fake looking, but let's check it out. Check it out now. Oh, there it is, guys. That's like a glass sphere. And is it like a solid glass sphere, or is it like a thin Christmas ornament type glass sphere? That I don't know. Let's look through and see, like, this is where you start to cheat a little bit. So let's see what this looks like if I go like that. So I'm looking through it. It seems like it is a solid glass object is what I'm guessing, like not a thin walled one, which I know that's an option in other renderers. So that's its glass. That's interesting. So 9 times out of 10 with glass, it's not a solid object. It's just like a plane, like a windshield is just like a thin piece of glass, and that's going to work out. What you're going to go do at this point with this glass, we'll deal with this more in the car. I think it's this. Yeah. Where do I change this? We'll play with this in the next episode, but essentially these reflections are coming in hot. And we're going to cheat that later because you don't want your car reflections to be like a billion. You don't want them blowing out like crazy. So let's hit Shift R and look at this. Does that bring down the Yeah, so you see how this reflection seems like a little bit dimmer? That's a little bit more realistic for what like a windshield's gonna look like in general. So it's not the most convincing glass because it's a sphere. When we do glass on cars and in wine bottles and stuff like that, blah blah blah, that's gonna look a little better. Essentially, again, turn on transparency, make it glass, and I would say come to the transparency, come to the reflectance, and turn down the strength, because this is gonna be like a full white reflection. It looks kind of fake. Looks really fake. So let's do our full pull away here. Fun stuff, right, guys? Shift R. Let this ray trace it up. So there it is on the left. Diffuse flat paint object. To its right is a full chrome object. After that, the red shiny object, like a bowling ball. That's my version of car paint. That's as complex as we're gonna get. To keep making car paint realistic, it's a little bit more advanced. We can go there, but I want to show you why it's important to be able to use a simple car paint shader first to understand the reflections that you're getting, and then at the end you can start to add like I can see my mic shaking, so my dryer's about to kick on. It's about to be real loud. You can make car paint more realistic by putting like paint chips in it and flakes and making it sparkly, and you actually end up having multiple diffuse layers, one that's kind of really diffused and one that's really shiny over it. That stuff looks good. Gets a little bit, if you want to spend the time and make one really nice looking car and use that over again, I recommend that. Next is our rubber surface. So it's essentially the same thing as our red ball, except that the diffusion, the reflection is very glossy. It's very blurry. And then we also brought the brightness down to the reflections because that's how rubber works. And then our other one is this weird glass sphere, which looks kind of crazy. So that's an overview of all the things you're going to need to texture a car, and honestly to texture almost anything. Now there's a lot more to deal with. There's things like if I backlight something like cloth, like say you want to do shears all of a sudden, or canvas or muslin or diffusion, you understand where that's kind of going. That's its own type of texture. There's something called subsurface scattering when we're doing skin and wax. There are textures that glow and emit light. There's a lot, but those are the main ones right there. That's the bread and butter of what you're going to be doing, like windows and mirrors, shiny stuff. Most things are going to be like the rubber, honestly. They're like kind of this blurry mix, and it's up to you to kind of understand that, and I'll be taking you through that. And that's how you start to add realism kind of for free to the scene. And I just want to end by showing you so that we have perspective in life of doing this process. What did the DP do here today? We added this big light source and we picked the angle. But so much of the 3D process is picking the texturing. So that's something I had to learn the hard way about lighting in 3D. I was like, oh, I'm just going to add lights. And I'm like, why don't these things look good? Why don't objects just automatically look good in 3D? It's like, so you have to know a lot about the textures too. So it's like you're kind of the production designer and the art department. When you're doing Cine Design, you'll start to realize that. And if you're like me, I always had my hands way deep in the art department. They were always angry at me. I'd be like moving couches and talking about paint colors because I kind of understood the final image of the photography. So I think I had a somewhat better perspective on what color the wall should be because I knew how I was going to light it and what tone I wanted in the color correct. All to say that in CG, while we're doing Cine Design, the lighting's the easy part and the fun part, honestly. The nitty-gritty gets into the textures, and you'll see when we start to go texture this car, it's a bit of a project. But the good thing is you do the project once, you learn it, and then you can save that car, bring it in, it always looks good. You don't have to keep doing this over and over again, but this will start to be second nature to you. The lighting probably already is second nature to you, framing up with the camera already second nature. Now we're just trying to get to the point where it's like, well, how do I make these objects look the way that I want to so I can communicate to my client what the final photography is going to look like. Woo! So that was our look at textures. That is the cleanest and fastest presentation that I could put together. I think it should be able to get you all the way through it. If this is your first time in 3D, maybe you guys are smarter than me, but I would recommend doing this exact exercise with this exact light so that you know that it's going to reflect correctly. Don't use space lights, don't use Kino flows, use the diffusion frames, the 4x or the 12x for this test, so that I can ensure you that the reflections are going to be correct. And next episode, guess what? We are going to, it might be 2 parts, actually. We'll see. We're going to go on to SketchUp Warehouse, 3D Warehouse, SketchUp 3D Warehouse. We're going to download our favorite car. I'm going to download mine, you download yours, and I am going to show you how to clean it up. Because like I said before, if you have Visualize or Studio R17, Cinema 4D, it automatically imports the C4D file, the SketchUp file. It looks pretty good. 60% good, and then we got to do 40% of work. But like I said, you do the work, you save the car, you're good to go, and you just build it into your workflow. It's not so bad. You typically don't have to visualize like 10 cars. You're going to have to visualize one. It's going to take a little prep work. So we are going to move on to making a car, which I know everyone's excited about. DPs that shoot cars, it's going to make you feel a lot better, and you're going to have some really cool imagery to bring to your meetings and scouts, and you might find yourself getting hired to shoot a lot more car jobs after you start visualizing this for them. So I will see you guys on the next episode. I hope you learned about textures today and you liked it. This is a weird way to end the episode. I'll see you guys later. Bye.